The 7 Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor. The fire burned, taking the chill from the night air. There they sat around the campfire, a group of boys and girls, and one old man. That man was named Sinbad, and long, long ago, he had been a sailor of some renown. "Tell us a story, Uncle," one of the children shrieked. The others chimed in, "Yes, tell us of your adventures. Tell us, please." Sinbad chuckled to himself. His skin was worn, beaten by the sun and the sea, but his eyes twinkled, and his mind was as sharp as the blade he wore at his side. "Well, you know that I've had many adventures," Sinbad chuckled. "So maybe I should start with my first?" The children nodded. They had all heard about the famous ship Chimera, and now our famous Captain Sinbad was seated before them as they hung on his every word. Sinbad chuckled. "I never wanted to become a sailor. I was happy spending my father's money and whatever I fancied, but soon there was nothing left. So I took to the sea to make my fortune. We sailed for weeks down the Tigris River and into the Gulf of Persia. It's quite something to see a wide ocean open out in front of you. Oh, and I got very seasick, more than once." The children laughed. "We sailed for weeks without encountering another soul, and soon we began to run out of food and water. We couldn't even catch a fish, which was rather unusual." The children nodded. One yawned. "Just as I was about to give up hope, I spied an island. We took out a rowboat and rowed to the land with Chimera anchored nearby. But it wasn't an island after all. It was..." Sinbad paused. The children leaned forward. "A giant sea serpent." A gasp came from the group. Sinbad stood and continued. "The snake rose from its slumber and flung our rowboat into the sea. I shouted for my crew to swim onto the ship while I stayed behind to battle the mighty beast." "What happened?" asked Abdul, Sinbad's nephew. "I stabbed my blade into the sea serpent's back and clung onto the hilt as the creature carried me down, down, down into the depth of the ocean. I thought it was the end of me, and I almost drowned, but luckily I was able to hold my breath until I floated back up onto the surface." Once the serpent was gone, the islanders thanked us, and we took many fine things back home to Baghdad. "So you were rich once again?" one of the children asked. "Well, I was definitely better off, but my taste for adventure had not left me, so off I set on my second voyage, and then a third." The fire began to crackle, and Sinbad stroked the flame with his walking stick. "On my second adventure, we came across an island that was no less dangerous," said Sinbad with a glint in his eye. The children were hungry for more of Sinbad's story. One boy named Mo was so excited, he broke wind very loudly, and the other children snickered. "Oh, Mo," said Sinbad, looking at the boy. "It seems a stiff wind blows from the south." Now, where was I? Oh, yes. On this island, we found giant eggs the size of elephants. And where there are giant eggs, there are giant birds. One child yelped and the others giggled. We tried to get back to the ship as quickly as possible, but one of the giant birds caught me in its talons and flew high into the sky. I thought my time was up, but luckily I was able to free myself. It was a long way to fall, but the ocean saved me once again." Empty-handed, we set sail back to Baghdad following one of my father's maps. On the way there, we came across an island which my father had marked with an X. Now this meant that either there would be a treasure on the island or death. But which? There was only one way to find out. Sinbad drew a stick from the fire and sketched a drawing of the island into the sand. Dead in the center, there was a coiled shape like a snail's shell. We discovered that the island was covered with gemstones, huge diamonds, sapphires, and emeralds, which is beyond our wildest dreams, Sinbad shrugged. So the X must have meant treasure. Or so I thought. The children all gasped. What I thought was a strange-shaped rock, Sinbad indicated toward the picture he had drawn, turned out to be another enormous sleeping snake, and when we started collecting the precious gems, the enormous snake woke up and began attacking us. One by one, the snake tossed my men into the air before catching them in its mouth and swallowing them whole. I am sad to say, I was the only one who came home from that voyage. Yes, I was rich, but alone. How did you escape the beast? One eager child asked. You won't believe it, Sinbad replied. The beast swallowed me whole, but I was able to cut my way out of its stomach with my blade, and in doing so, I killed it. Wow, said the children together. But how did you get home without your crew? Asked another child. I sailed the Chimera on my own, Sinbad replied. Sinbad, you are truly mighty, said Mo. No, not really, Sinbad said quietly. Just lucky. Come, it's time for you children to be in bed, said Sinbad. But what of your other adventures? A young girl asked. We all know there were 7. There were many more voyages than that, Sinbad replied, but I learned a long time ago that a man is more than deeds alone. But I shall tell you of the other 4 if you all promise to listen carefully. The children all nodded excitedly. With a new crew, I set sail once more. We found an island in the middle of an ocean, plentiful with fruit and fresh water, and there were no treasures to speak of, apart from one. And what was that? Asked the girl who had persuaded Sinbad to stay and share his adventures a little longer. Not a that, Sinbad replied, but a who. I don't understand, she said. The island had a princess. She had been captured by a tribe of people and they planned to eat her. Cannibals? Another child spoke up. Yes, indeed, Sinbad replied. The most horrible race I have ever come across. We tried to rescue the princess, but it was not to be. The cannibals would not let her leave, and we barely escaped with our own lives. The next island we came across on our journey back home had an enormous cave, and we journeyed deep within to discover a stream of gold. We managed to dig out enough of it so that when we returned home, we could all be rich. But as we left the cave, weighed down with gold, we discovered a giant bird who attacked us. It picked up a huge rock in its talons, flew high, and dropped them on us, sinking our rowboats. We had to swim for our lives, and we were unable to carry the gold. It is probably still on that island, along with that ill-tempered creature. After that last adventure, I thought that it was wise to stay at home for good, Sinbad said. There was a groan of disappointment from the children, and yet, still, the ocean called to me. So I decided to set off in search of treasure once more. The children clapped and giggled. The fire was smoke, the night was cold, yet they didn't care. We set sail in the warm summertime, explained Sinbad, but we were at sea for so long that by the time we decided to head home, the weather had turned cold and the sea became our enemy. Sadly, the Chimera wasn't ready for the wildest storm she had ever encountered. A bolt of lightning split the mast in two and spread fire all about the deck. The fire reached the storeroom, set light to the oil there, and before could do anything to stop it, it was ablaze and sinking fast. The crew made it to the rowboats, but they believed I was dead. "They left you?" asked little Mo, his mouth wide open in shock. "They did the right thing," Sinbad said. "I was caught in a whirlpool beneath the waves. It sucked me down and finally spat me out at a small group of islands off the coast we now know as India. I woke up in a cave, tired and hungry. But luckily I met a tribe of friendly natives. They nursed me back into health and helped me build a boat, and after many months at sea, I finally returned home. I wasted no time building a new ship to replace Chimera. I named it Chimera too." Just then, a voice came from the darkness. "And what of your final voyage, Sinbad?" The children looked around to see a woman standing there. "It's Yasmin," one child gasped. "Sinbad's wife," whispered another excitedly. "Well," Sinbad replied, "my final voyage was the most important of them all." "I think you owe it to the children to share your final adventure," Jasmine teased. Sinbad chuckled. "Your wish is my command." Jasmine sat down by the fire. "Come now, boys and girls," she said. "Keep me warm as my husband spins another of his tall tales." Sinbad smiled warmly at Jasmine and then began. "We set sail from Baghdad and headed towards India, loaded with cargo, and sure enough, we found merchants there who would pay a good price. All was well on the journey home until a thick fog fell upon us, and hidden in the fog, pirates!" Jasmine let out a comical gasp, which in turn caused the children to gasp too. "It was terrifying," said Sinbad. "A huge pirate ship pulled alongside and boarded us. We were outnumbered 10-1, and we had no choice but to surrender. The pirates took everything, but thankfully they let my ship and the crew go free. They took me as prisoner, and I watched in chains a Chimera to sail away without me." "What happened next?" asked one of the girls who had snuggled close to Jasmine. "Well," Jasmine interrupted, "before long, the great Sinbad found himself locked in a cell below deck with only a beautiful young woman for company." "Was it you?" the girl asked excitedly. "It was her," Sinbad replied. Jasmine had been taken prisoner by the pirates the day before. They were planning to sell us both at the first port they could find. "But you escaped?" asked Abdul. "Well, no actually," said Yasmin. "We were taken to the market and sold to an elephant hunter. His ship was piled with elephant tusks, and I was horrified. Where I am from, the elephant is sacred. What this man had done was horrible, and I couldn't let him get away with it. Luckily, I had someone by my side who was willing to help me." Sinbad smiled at his wife. "After several long days and nights at sea," Jasmine continued, "the hunter had me dressed in a fine robe and brought to his cabin to dance for him." Sinbad continued, "At the same time, I broke the lock on the cell and escaped into the ship's hold, where I found weapons and barrels of gunpowder. I tipped the gunpowder onto the deck and set light to it. Meanwhile," Jasmine said, "I danced right up to the elephant hunter, and when I was close enough, I kicked him so hard that he toppled over onto the deck, just as an explosion rocked the ship. We were free," said Sinbad. "We clambered aboard a rowboat and paddled swiftly away as the hunter's ship sank to the bottom of the ocean with the hunter inside. "I'd never been so happy to see a ship sink," Jasmine said quietly. Sinbad reached over and cupped her face in his hand. "And I've never been so happy to sink one," he said. The children were silent until one of them finally yawned and the spell was broken. "Now it's time for bed," Sinbad said. Jasmine clapped her hands together. "Come now. Your parents will be wondering what on earth has become of you." She ushered them away from the campfire and down the hill toward a small encampment of Bedouin tents in the valley below. Sinbad turned from the fire and followed after his wife. He caught her hand and drew her to him and whispered gently in her ear, "And we all lived happily ever after."